Hello everyone, and welcome to Week 10 of our Government 2306 Introduction to Texas State and Local Government class. This week, we will be looking at the judicial branch of Texas government. Texas has a rather large and complex court structure with many courts having conflicting or overlapping jurisdictions. These include the Texas Supreme Court, which is the highest civil court in Texas and is comprised of 9 justices. It has the final authority over civil cases at the state appellate level. The Texas Court of Criminal Appeals, which is the highest criminal court in Texas, and like its counterpart consists of 9 elected justices who have final authority over state appellate criminal cases. We also have 14 intermediate level courts of appeal who hear appeals from district and county courts in order to determine whether the decisions of the lower courts followed appropriate legal principles and court procedures. The district courts serve as the workhorse, the major trial courts in Texas, and usually have general jurisdiction over a broad range of both civil and criminal cases. The county courts exist in some counties where the population is so small that a county judge who's more like the mayor of a county serves as a civil or criminal judge. These are very rare today. Statutory county courts at law tend to hear less serious cases than those heard by the district courts, but they can hear both criminal and misdemeanor and civil cases. Statutory probate courts are specialized courts that have limited jurisdiction over such things as wills and guardianship matters, such as whether someone who is mentally ill should be appointed a guardian or should be involuntarily placed in a residential treatment facility. Justice of the Peace Courts, which are literally the People's Court. These are the local trial courts with limited jurisdiction over things like small claims and very minor criminal misdemeanors that usually don't have jail time attached to them, like a traffic ticket or a minor citation. Lastly, there are the municipal courts, which are local trial courts with limited jurisdiction over violations of city ordinances and very minor criminal matters, which again are not usually punished by jail time. Now, I've used some legal terms already, so let me try to let you understand a few of the legal terms that you will encounter this week. First is the difference between civil law and criminal law. In civil law, a plaintiff presents a complaint outlining the harm that has been done to the defendant by the defendant, who files an answer in response. Civil cases use a standard called the preponderance of the evidence, meaning that the evidence must somehow simply persuade the judge or jury to lean to one side or the other. In a civil case, the person or group who brings a complaint to court stating that he or she or they have been harmed by the actions of the defendant, who is the person against whom the civil complaint is filed. In criminal law, the state alleges a violation of criminal law and is usually represented in court by a prosecutor. In a criminal case, the plaintiff is always the state. Violations of criminal law include felonies and misdemeanors. Felonies are more serious criminal offenses that carry jail terms of a year or more in a state jail or prison. Misdemeanors are less serious criminal offenses that carry fines or jail terms less than a year in length. In Texas, if you are charged with a serious criminal offense, you must be indicted, which means a group of people called a grand jury have been persuaded that enough evidence exists to take a case to court for trial. Even though a defendant has the right to a trial by jury in Texas, he or she may waive that right and have the judge preside over a bench trial, which means that the judge makes the decision as to guilt or innocence as well as punishment. The standard of evidence in a criminal trial is beyond a reasonable doubt, which means that there's enough evidence to prove the guilt of the defendant beyond what any reasonable person would accept as proof of innocence. All jury decisions must be unanimous in order to convict a defendant. As with many other things in Texas, the judiciary has a great deal of politics hanging over it. For one thing, most judges start by being appointed to an empty position, then they run every 4 to 6 years for re-election. However, when a judge decides not to run again, he or she can hold their position until the end of their term, when a new election is held to find his or her replacement. Again, these elections are partisan in nature. This means that you must go through a primary election, possibly a runoff, and then a general election. Voters in judicial elections typically have very little information about someone who's running for a bench position. Most voters make their decisions simply based on the partisan affiliation of the candidate rather than on their credentials or skill set. There have been recommendations for reforming the judicial system in Texas and changing the way that we select our judges, but for the most part, these have gone nowhere. One very popular alternative is to have a committee of qualified jurists, judges, and attorneys review a candidate's credentials and qualifications, then forward a recommendation to the governor for a more informed decision. The judge would then stand for re-election by the citizens every 4 to 6 years. But because of the partisan politics involved, most of the support for such an idea is limited. Lastly, there are some issues that impact our lives which have been passing through the justice system. First is the limitation of the ability to bring a civil case to trial or to obtain a large jury award. Now, this is known as tort reform, and we will look at it in its place in Texas today. We are a big tort reform state. Another is the evaluation of qualifications for lawyers and the possible consequences of fraud or misconduct, especially among prosecutors. And lastly is judicial conduct, which is investigated by the State Commission on Judicial Conduct. The Commission relies on complaints from the public, from other attorneys, and from members of the judiciary, the judges. It can impose sanctions, which can lead to disciplinary action, restriction, or removal of an attorney's license, or removal from office for judges. Okay, now let's get on to your tasks for the week. First, we will be doing discussion question number 10, which simply asks if Texas should switch to a merit-based system for selecting judges, or should it stay with the current system of partisan elections. You will read the background document that I've attached to the discussion question, then you'll post your response and respond to another student's post with constructive criticism or suggestions and comments with supporting thoughts and ideas. Next, you will have your last current event assignment for the semester, which is current event number 5. Yay! I think by now that you know how the current event assignments are to be completed, but remember to use the attached current event form and to submit your work in either Word or PDF format. And lastly, I have included the reading for your last position paper. This is a series of articles on the dispute over the Duranguito neighborhood of El Paso and the city's desire to have it condemned and replaced with a sports arena. Now be sure to read all of the documents over this weekend to get yourself ready for the position paper. Okay, that's it for this week. And as always, if you have questions or concerns, please email me, message me through Blackboard, or call me at 301-9863. Of course, you can always speak to me before or after class. As always, have a great week, and I will see you in class and online.